We all have mental health. It is just as important as physical health. It is not only about mental illness or mental disorders. This is just one part of a bigger picture. It's best to think about mental health as being on a continuum, rather than people being either mentally ill or mentally well. We are all on the continuum, and we move up and down according to factors such as our genetic makeup and upbringing, our life circumstances, and the stresses we are under. At one end of the continuum, we have mental disorders, like depression or anxiety. And at the other end, we have states of positive mental health, when we're thriving, content, and fulfilled. The aim of mental health interventions is to move people up the continuum so that they're able to reach their full potential and live satisfying lives. The World Health Organization describes mental health as a state of well-being in which every individual realizes his or her own potential, can cope with the normal stresses of life, can work productively and fruitfully, and is able to make a contribution to his or her community. Being mentally healthy means being resilient and able to cope with difficult times, feeling in control, being confident, feeling good about yourself, managing and expressing your emotions, building and maintaining good relationships. We all experience periods when we feel stressed, worried, anxious, sad, afraid, or angry. These are all normal emotions. However, when these emotions become severe enough that it interferes with a person's ability to function daily, and these feelings become persistent over time, then it can develop into a mental health problem. There are many different types of mental disorders. When left untreated, mental disorders can be chronic and long-lasting, and are associated with increased disability. They significantly have an impact on daily functioning and frequently interfere with family, social, and work responsibilities. Fortunately, there are effective treatments and evidence-based interventions available that aim to help individuals understand and cope with symptoms of mental illness. However, very few people with mental disorders access existing treatment services. This may be due to barriers such as the stigma attached to seeking help, the lack of understanding of mental health problems, uncertainty of how to get help, or the fear of disclosing mental health problems. Research shows that stigma remains one of the biggest factors preventing people from seeking help early for their mental health problems and getting the appropriate support they need. It is important to acknowledge that we all have mental health and have a personal responsibility to learn how we can improve and maintain our well-being in order to lead meaningful and satisfying lives. Want to learn how you can do this? Great news! Why not join one of our communities and keep exploring Maudsley Learning online?
Mental health, very delicate topic, one we don't always talk about. And so in bringing you up, I want to be able to get into this that we might be able to bless somebody on today. And so to start with, why don't you tell those who don't know you who you are and your background in this field, this industry, and experience, and then just your professional role here at Bayview.
Absolutely. Good morning to you. Is it still morning? It's still morning. Good morning, church. Good morning to each of you as well. I'm not before you as an expert, but I am before you to say my name is Monique Brooks. I am a believer, and I have lived experience with depression and anxiety. I can say that now today, by the grace of God, that is, that I've overcome those challenges. My onset was probably about 2006, 2007. Some of you may know that I was married once before. I call that my previous life. Okay. I was married once before, and I have to say this. Some of these struggles, challenges, not more so the disorders, they can be both self-inflicted and others inflicted. And if I'm to be honest, my depression, both depression and anxiety, were self-inflicted. there were decisions that I made, choices that I made that I probably should not have made. Getting married before I even turned 21 was a decision that I probably should not have made. I thought I was ready. I thought I was in love. I thought things was great. You know. Now listen, this is the 11 o'clock service, so we're going to be real in here, right? So y'all know what I'm saying, right? Right. We've been there, right? And I have to say this. I was given wise counsel from my family, from, God rest his soul, Pastor Winters. And they were asking, are you sure you want to do this? Are you sure? Actually, those of you who knew my papa, his question to me was, well, are you pregnant? And I said, no, I got to be pregnant. I'm ready to do this. Yeah, I wasn't ready. And so over the years, I slowly but surely realized that I was not ready. And as a result of not being ready at the age of 20, the marriage was resolved. It was dissolved, excuse me. And so as a result of that, I went into a depression. I had no idea that's where I was. It was my mother who asked me the hard question, are you okay? It was my mother who said, you're not okay, you're depressed. And even in her, the person closest to me, in her asking me these questions, I was still in denial. I still hid, I still masked everything. I would put on a smile, put on, as we say, right? At home, I would put on with my friends. I would put on here at church even. I'm operating as though there's really nothing wrong with me. But then when I get by myself and it gets quiet and I can't stop crying, I'm in the closet hiding because I don't want my family to know what's going on with me. I'm depressed. And it was my mother who, it took her to show me where I was in that moment. When it comes to anxiety, depression, let me backtrack. Depression, to me now, is not so much a struggle. Do I have sad days? Sure. But I'm in control of those sad days, and I don't allow myself, by the grace of God again, to go to the dark places I've been before. But when it comes to anxiety, when Pastor gave me this assignment, I became anxious. It's just my thing, right? I'm anxious right now. But I don't respond to my anxiety the way I did on the onset. So onset, about 2007, 2008, I get into my car, I get into this really bad argument. Amarion is he's still car seat age, so he's still like a baby. He's baby toddler age, and toddler age, let me say that. And Massachusetts, y'all know where that is, yes, going down to University. I'm on that street, going down, making that curve. There's the big, y'all know those big metal signs. I'm literally feeling like I'm in an outer body experience because I've allowed my thoughts to take captive of me. I get too close to this metal sign and it smashes my side mirror into my passenger side mirror and completely shatters the mirror. There's glass all over the place. Glass ends up in the back seat on the floor in Amarion's car seat. Thank God he didn't have a scratch on. It was in that moment that I said, God, I cannot allow my thoughts to take control of me anymore. And so although I still battle with anxiety, I don't respond to it like I used to. So again, I'm still in this fight. I'm not sitting before you saying, yeah, I've conquered it all and now I'm perfect. That's not why I'm here. And now, because of lived experience and because I know others are suffering, I can be a voice for them. I can be a voice for those who are afraid to use their own voice. I can be a voice for those who are unaware of what's going on with them. I am a safe place for them. So now I'm director of our RE3 ministry. It's our mental health and Christian counseling ministry. We'll talk more about that later. I am also a mental health first aider. I am a QPR trainer. QPR stands for Question, Persuade, Refer, and that's for prevention, suicide prevention, excuse me. And that's where I am now. And so now God has purposed me for such a time as this, and I didn't even realize that what I was going through was preparing me for even today. Yeah.
Amen. As you were talking about the onset, there seemed to be kind of this period where there may have been denial or ignoring or what we call masking. Can you talk a little bit about that and maybe explain why we can get to a point where it's really easy to deny and ignore and mask?
It's easy to ignore, to mask, to avoid, because you don't have to deal with your struggle. It's easier when you put on so that no one has an opportunity to even ask you the hard questions. When you're asked the hard questions, you're now faced with, okay, now I have to respond. And you have an option to respond with, yes, I'm struggling, or I'm gonna keep masking, as I did originally. But it's easier to avoid, to eliminate judgment. It's easier to avoid, to eliminate discrimination, the talks, the naysayers, the looks, it's easier to just put on a happy face so that you don't appear weak, because appearing weak is taboo, especially for a black woman, right? And so if I appear weak, now I'm vulnerable, and I even stand the opportunity for others to take advantage of me, whether that can be on that's a whole nother topic, but yeah, whole nother sermon. But it's easier just to put on so that others don't tap into your business, and you don't have to tap into your business. When the questions are asked, now you're faced with answering them. Now you're faced with dealing with them. I didn't want to talk about my marital issues. I didn't want to talk about him. I didn't even want to talk about me, right? So it wasn't better, but I felt better just saying, I'm okay. There's nothing wrong with me. And it did help. So it may seem like it's easier, but in all reality, it's more harmful than helpful. Yeah.
Amen. So as you were discussing that, one of the things that I'm hearing as kind of on the counseling side, but maybe we could talk about for those who might be experiencing what they're experiencing is one, is it important? Why is it important to take responsibility for what you're thinking and what you're feeling? If you can answer that first, and I'll get to my second question.
Okay. Who likes to take responsibility for their actions? Oh, yeah? You're the only one, brother. Congratulations. No, but seriously, we don't. If we're to be honest, we don't, right? It's hard to take an inner look at self. It's hard to see self for who self really is. And I didn't want to do that. I didn't want to look within me to see where my fault was, because I had fault in it too. I wasn't a perfect wife, but I didn't want to deal with me and my shortcomings. And so when we are asked the hard questions and we begin to say, okay, I'm going to deal with it, well, taking responsibility means now I'm going to have to respond differently. So I can't snap off like I used to. I can't just run my mouth like I used to. Some of us like to swing. I can't swing like I used to. Right, thank you. And so our actions have to become different in regards to what our thought process is. We have to put things in perspective. And so self-awareness is huge. It's important to know where you are mentally. If you don't know, can I talk about triggers? If you don't know where you are mentally, anything is subject to be a trigger for you. Let me talk about my triggers. Some people are triggers for me. Can I be honest? There are certain people who are triggers for me. And because I'm aware of that, I have maybe like T-minus 10 seconds to be in your presence before I might have a set-off, right? So I have to remove myself from the situation because you're a trigger for me. Places are triggers for me. Certain places are triggers for me. I don't go down certain streets. I don't go in certain areas because they're triggers for me. Certain topics are triggers for me. But I know this, aware of my triggers. And so if I'm not able to completely avoid them, because sometimes God puts me in places where I can't avoid them. And I believe those are testing times. So he's like, okay, you're aware, so how are you going to handle that, right? And so he's trying to see if I am in a place where if I couldn't handle my triggers, I don't think I could be able to be up here today to speak about that, right? And so he has brought me to a place where even if triggers are present, I'm not able to completely abort, I'm able to deal and manage and function even when triggers are present. And so self-awareness is huge. You have to know where you are. And ask those closest to you, those people who really, really know you, ask them, you know, in certain situations, how do I respond to this? In certain situations, what do I do from your perspective? Because sometimes it takes another person to tell us about us, to see us from a different point of view. And there's nothing wrong with that, but it has to be a trustworthy person, right? Somebody you trust. So yeah, I hope I got that for you.
You actually answered my second question. If I could deal with triggers just a little bit further, it sounds like when a trigger comes upon, it's this flood or rush of emotion and thought that sometimes we cannot contain. And so out of that, then there are certain signs and symptoms that come out of the triggers. And I don't know if we've talked about signs and symptoms yet, because somebody might not even know that they're depressed or anxious. They just may be going day to day facing different triggers. So the question becomes, what are some of the signs and symptoms that we might need to be aware of?
Absolutely. Well, for me, dealing with depression, uncontrollable crying. I just, out of the blue, I'm crying, and I just can't seem to control my crying, right? Avoiding people, wanting to be isolated by myself. I had a lot of that. Denial is a sign. You know, if somebody as close to me as my mom was and she's asking me, are you okay? She's asking me that for a reason, right? Because she knows her daughter. And so she's seeing me act differently. There's been a shift. And so those are signs. The speak of wanting to harm self or others is also a sign. What else do we have? Mood changes are a sign. If you notice that I'm really up here all the time, I'm like high energy, and then 2 seconds later, don't talk to me. Don't even look at me. That's a sign that something is not right with me. What else? Repeating drugs and alcohol, you know, continuously having that, especially if somebody wasn't into that before and they all of a sudden take that on, that's a sign. When people are leading up to suicide ideation, when that's present, and they start giving away their prized possessions, that's a sign. When they start putting their affairs, now you're supposed to have your affairs in order, but when they do it in like one day, that's a sign. And we have to ask questions. Withdrawing for a long period of time, extreme difficulty in concentrating, not being able to focus. Those are that's not an exhaustive list, but those are some signs that when you know a person and there's been a shift in their behavior, their attitude, their mood, those are signs. Yeah.
That's good. You know, I have found that when we are aware that we might be depressed or anxious, rather than get help, and we're trying to deal with that today, we'll retreat because of stigma. Mm-hmm. So I want to talk about that for a second. I'm realizing that the start of a stigma doesn't always happen when you become depressed. A lot of times stigmatization starts when you're young. It's embedded in you. I told the story first two services. I'll tell it again. I have a younger sister. And her and I, when we were young, were running around the house. And both of us went around the corner, and both of us bust our head on this table. My sister fell back crying, loud and screaming. I fell back holding my head, trying to figure out what happened because the whole room was dizzy. My parents came and picked up my sister and said, "Baby, you want to talk about it? You okay? That big mean table hurt you?" Right. Then they looked at me and they did what?
Get up.
Get up. Walk it off. I didn't learn to talk about my mental health issues in that moment. I learned to stuff them. And it's a generational thing. I have 3 daughters, and all 3 of them play sports. And inevitably, when you have kids that play sports, all 3 of them have been to the emergency room and had some type of treatment. And all 3 of them, at one point, I told them to get up. Walk it off. So I perpetuated the stigmatization of expressing your feelings. And so I had to learn to do that differently. And I shared with the 8:30, my youngest daughter was the one to teach me that. Because after I told her to get up and walk it off, and we ended up in the emergency room, and she had a spiral fracture. The moment the doctor turned around and told her that's what she had, she grabbed the cane she had been walking with and swung at me. And so I decided I'm going to let her express her feelings, or she going to hurt somebody, maybe me.
Right.
So I had to end the stigma that comes with mental health. Just for those that may not know, what is a stigma? What are the effects?
Sure. The greatest stigma of mental illness would be that it's not okay to not be okay. We hear it all the time. It is okay to not be okay. If it's okay for us to be unhealthy physically, because it happens, right? Why is it not okay for us to not be okay mentally? And so we have to ask ourselves that. Why do we put that on people? Why do we look at it as something that's so negative, right? Why do we look at it as something that's so dark? Your mental state is just as important, if not more so important, than your physical well-being, right? One cannot work without the other. If I'm mentally incapable of getting up because I'm just held down by my thoughts, I don't want to be bothered, well, my family is going to suffer as a result of that. My body, going back to me, my body is going to suffer as a result of that. And so it is okay not to be okay. We avoid people who may be suffering with a mental illness, disorder. We talked about discrimination already. We look at people differently. We see them as potentially being unstable. as being volatile. We see them as being unsafe even. We even, put that word on them, that word crazy. Yeah. We call them crazy. And it's unfair to call people with a mental illness crazy. They're not crazy. Reality is, y'all, each and every one of us in here is struggling with something. That's the reality. My struggle might not be your struggle, and your struggle might not be my struggle, but we all have a struggle. And so if you title my struggle as crazy, then yours is going to be titled crazy too. So now we have crazy who meets crazy. So how does that look? Now nobody can help anyone, right? And so we have to be careful putting these titles and the stigma on mental illness. It's just as important as our physical well-being. We might think we pass judgment. We're so judgmental. We think that because people have a mental illness that they are incapable of the day-to-day. Now, some may be, but that doesn't mean that it will always be that way. And if we take the time to be there, invest in that person, speak life into that person, and help that person along their journey, we're actually helping them get better, right? By just being present. Maybe you don't say a word. Maybe you don't even have a word to say because you yourself don't understand it. And that's okay. But just being there to be an encouragement, to be a presence for them it says a lot. It says a lot about your Christianity, right? Because we're supposed to be there for our brothers and sisters. We're supposed to love our brothers and sisters. That's what Jesus commands us to do. And so it's important that we as the church begin to, and we're doing a good job at Bayview. We're not doing a great job. We could do better, right? But we're attempting to remove that stigma at Bayview. And I'm really excited about where we're going to go from here on out after today.
Amen.
Yeah.
Amen. It's interesting. As you were describing stigma, you used the word discriminate and judge. And the way you used them is what's interesting to me. Because if I'm suffering from a mental illness and someone discriminates against me or judges me, it is their thoughts being imposed on me, and I'm the one stigmatized.
Right.
Which means a stigma isn't a me problem,
Right.
it's a you problem. And so at some point, yes, we've got to get to the ministerial standing where when we see someone struggling, we don't create a you problem, we create an opportunity for us all to heal. And so definitely as I'm listening to this and I'm hearing this stigma, then there also has to be some effects of the stigma. Can we talk a little bit about the effects of the stigma?
Absolutely. One of the major ones I would probably say is the reluctancy to seek help, because you're so ashamed at your present state, whether because other people have that judgment on you, their thoughts about you, or you just don't know. You just don't know. And so you're unaware of the first step to take. It's okay to not know. It's not okay to stay in the unknown. But yeah, the reluctancy to get help, get treatment, not understanding mental disorders or mental health is another effect. Your family as well, they don't know how to help you because then they themselves are unaware of how to help you. And so that's why, investing in educating yourself on mental illness and mental health is so important. But one of the other effects is self-doubt. And you talked about it being a me problem versus a you problem. Well, that's a me problem. That's the self-doubt is a me problem. When you're aware of where you are mentally, when you know where you are physically, it's gonna be a little difficult for others' opinions of you to seep into you. Okay? If you are aware of where you are, if you are aware of your identity, it's hard for others to tell you about you. So if somebody came up to me and said, "Oh, you are depressed," well, baby, I knew that. You're not telling me nothing new. "Oh, you anxious right now?" I have this thing that I'm dealing with called anxiety, right? And that doesn't bother me because I'm already aware of where I am. But if you're unsure of where you are, but you know something is not right, do you stop at the unknown, or do you take a step and ask yourself the hard question, what's going on with me? And then taking that a step further and seeking help to see what is going on with you. Because if you don't know, you don't know, right? But there are people who can help with that process. That's why they've been put in place, psychiatrists, your medical providers, counselors have been created to help us filter through all those thoughts so that we can become more aware of where we are mentally. So self-doubt is huge. If I know where I am, it's hard for you, Pastor Dre, to tell me where I am, because I already know. You know what I'm saying? And I'm okay with knowing, right? So those are just some effects. Yeah.
Amen. Amen. Knowing who you are is definitely, it helps to diffuse some of the attacks from others on you. You talked about educating yourself. How do we do that? Just a couple minutes there.
Absolutely. So there are several resources where you can go and research and do some background on mental health. NAMI, NAMI, National Alliance for Mental Illness, is nationally known. We have a Grace Alliance, who is also nationally known, and we partner with them for our Grace groups. We use their curriculum for our Grace groups, our Grace support groups. Those are our mental health support groups. I'll get to that later. There's mentalhealth.org. Your medical providers, again, make sure you're proactive in that, though, because they're not going to ask you. If you go to the doctor because your big toe hurt, they're dealing with your big toe. So you have to be proactive in speaking up for yourself and saying, I need some clarity in this area. Medical providers. And then I say this lastly, and this is not exhaustive list as well, but I say this lastly, the church. But the church should really be the first place that we should be able to go to. But we've gotten away from being a safe space because we're judgmental, because of the stigma, because of the generational curses, because we look at each other differently, because we are different. How about that? And so the church has come away from being a safe space, and we have to return to that. It's important that if we, the church, are saying, it's a safe space, it needs to be that. It has to be that, so that when you are here on a Sunday or throughout the week and you're dealing with something that is so heavy, you can look to your brother or sister and say, help me with this. And the person who is receiving it, it's with them. What do I mean by that? You're not going to the next person and saying, girl, guess what so-and-so just came and told me? They struggling with depression. Well, you just become unsafe. And so we have to return back to being the safe space that the church once was. I mean, we were, right? And so we have to get back to that. But just asking questions. We have a plethora of resources here at Bayview. We have a number of people who work in the medical profession, as well as with our our RE3 ministry. And so we understand that the church doesn't have all the answers, but neither does the community. And so if the church does what the church is supposed to do and the community does what the community is supposed to do, but we do it together, can you imagine how powerful that would be if we did what we did, the community did what they did, but we all did it together to help one another? And so that's, a little bit of how we can educate ourselves.
Amen. Mm-hmm. Speaking of the church, you had an acronym for church. Do you want to share that real briefly?
Absolutely. And so it might be on the screen. I think we got it up now. Yay. Thank you, Sammy. That was so good. Yeah, give it up for Sammy. He did that real good. Okay, so what is the church's role? C stands for care for people living with mental illness. Not only them, but their families as well, because the person struggling is not the only person who's affected, but those who are around them, their loved ones, those closest to them, they're affected as well. H in church stands for help with practical needs. If you've never yet dealt with a mental illness, you don't know what that looks like, you don't know what that feels like. It's kind of like being unable to do something as simple as tie your shoe. That's simple. But those of us who have dealt with a mental disorder, that can be a struggle. And so helping with the practical needs, maybe, taking a trip to the grocery store for them, making a meal for them, being with them when they go to doctor's appointments or taking them to doctor's appointments, washing a load of clothes for them, just those practical needs that need to be met that can be difficult for a person who is struggling to manage from day to day. R stands for remove the stigma surrounding mental illness. We've talked about that already. And C, collaborate with the community. We've spoken about that. And then this beautiful one here is H. Sorry, I was going fast. H stands for offer hope. And it is, this is the place of hope. It's supposed to be the place of hope, right? So why shouldn't the church offer hope? Yeah.
Amen, amen. And we indeed are charged and challenged to do that by God. The Bible's very simple. Love everyone. Mm-hmm. Love everyone. Love doesn't gossip. Mm-hmm. Love doesn't judge. Mm-hmm. Love doesn't look at someone like they're less than. Love offers hope. You had 10 reasons for sharing hope. You want to go through those?
Yeah, real quick, I'll share those. I think Sam has a good job. Number one, God has an amazing plan and purpose for your life. So we as the church, we're to offer these reasons for hope, instilling, speaking life into those who are struggling with mental illness. You are God's masterpiece, each and every one of us. God purposely designed you the way that you are. We have to encourage and remind our brothers and sisters about that. You are formed for God's family. This hard time is temporary. It absolutely is temporary. Amazing growth and maturity can come from dark places. I'm sitting before you as a testament to that. You're an amazing friend. You are kind-hearted and considerate. All you need is a little bit of grace. We have to learn to extend grace to our brothers and sisters. The same grace that we're extended, we need to extend it out to our brothers and sisters as well. Let them know that you're praying for them. It doesn't stop at praying, but let them know that you're praying for them. And then also, lastly, let them know that they're not alone. We're not alone in this journey when it comes to dealing with mental illness. Like I said before, each of us has something. And would you want to travel that road with your something alone? No, I wouldn't. And so letting them know that they're not by themselves and they have you to count, to depend on, to travel with them, walk alongside them.
Amen. So at this point, we've been talking about and trying to encourage those to take the first step. I think what also would be encouraging is if we could see someone who's gone through these steps from the first part of the struggle through living daily with success and mental health. And so you've asked someone to join us today. Would you mind introducing her?
Absolutely. I'm so proud of this young lady. I've known her for a very long time. And she is a living testament to being the person who just starts off by asking for prayer, and then being the person who says enough is enough, and then actually takes the step in asking for help. So, ladies and gentlemen, would you please help me welcome Rebecca Tuatasi to the stage.
Amen. First and foremost, that we all might celebrate, I want to thank you for your courage for coming up here.
Thank you.
I imagine there are those sitting amongst us right now that would not have the courage to take that first step. So first and foremost, so it's truly with that courage that I ask that maybe you would take a few minutes to share your testimony and your story.
Like stated, my name is Rebecca Atuatasi. I am a believer, and I live with bipolar depression disorder with anxiety. Just being able to say that is a lot. I hit a wall roughly a year and a half, 2 years ago. After we had our first child, our first son, our only son, I went through postpartum depression, and it was severe, but it went untreated. And I never received the help and the counseling that I needed. With that being said, 3 children later, my children became my mask. They became my focus. They became my reason to get up in the morning. Depression sneaks up on you. And by the time I realized how out to sea I was, because that's how I felt on most days, I couldn't even see the shore anymore. My saving grace on most mornings would be I would call my mom and she wouldn't even realize I would call her to get the courage just to get to work. I've had over, I want to say at least 8 different jobs 6 to 8 different jobs in the past 12 years, because I could never figure out why I couldn't stay focused at work. Why work at the beginning would be so easy, then by halfway, come the 3-year mark, it was just too confusing. There was just too much going on in my head. I could never slow down my thought process. When our son left, I believe that was a trigger, now that I look back, because he was one of my focus. He was one of my purpose, and that purpose had graduated on. And I remember just not being able to process my thoughts or my words. I could never figure out why I was so sad. You have no reason to be sad. You've got 3 gorgeous kids, a husband that serves a church family, you sub on the Ursha board, your children are in EOJ, just life is perfect. Why are you so sad? And I felt guilty because my husband couldn't figure it out. And love, honor, and protect me, and he would tell me, I can't help you. I don't know how to help you. And I felt like a burden. So I prayed like I was told to. I asked God to deliver me from whatever I was going through. I spoke to my primary care physician, my doctor, prescription after prescription. It was like band-aiding a flesh wound. And one Friday morning, I decided I had enough. I couldn't take it anymore. And I got in my car, and I'm on my way to work, and I had already told myself if I just veer off the freeway over the edge, it would just look like an accident. And our son is a college athlete. Most, they don't wake up before 10 o'clock. But he called me that morning. And by the 4th or 5th call, I finally answered, because that was right when I was going to just And those of you that know Junior, he's real monotone. He's very laid back. Gets it from his dad. But when he called me, he was just on 10, like he had just won Super Bowl or something. Mom, what are you doing? You did it. And I'm like, what do you need, son? And he said, nothing. I'm getting it in like you told me to. Because I had told him, you need to get up in the morning, do your devotion, hit the locker room when no one else is there. Let that be your time. And he was just calling me to tell me that he started doing what I advised him to do. But he wasn't realizing that I was going through so much. And I didn't realize I was going through so much. And when I got off the phone with him, I just had a moment. I drove into work. I called and I told him I'd be there late. And I begged God. I begged him. First, I thanked him for sending my son so that I could hear his voice again. And I just told him, I said, Lord, continue to keep me, because only you've been keeping me these past years. Because when I look back on things, I've been depressed for a long time. And I was just masking and staying focused. PTA and this and that and that and this. And finally, he kept me still enough to say, no, you're not okay. And it's okay that you're not okay. Because the same way people deal with high blood pressure and whatever else, you've got to deal with your mind. And you've got to take care of your mind. And so that Sunday, Pastor Brooks preached on he started a sermon series on mental health. And I said, whoa, God, you answered my prayer that quick. Thank you. It's been a journey. And the whole time he was preaching, I felt like I was just, a weight was being lifted off of me. And you know how you say when the pastor's preaching, he's talking to you? No, I really felt his presence. And every time Pastor Brooks had a valid point or we would lock eyes, and I didn't see him, I saw God. Because it wasn't the normal Brooks you see walking around. His demeanor had changed and everything was different. So that gave me hope. Because when you put it in our community and you bring it to the forefront the way he did, like I said, we want to put a Band-Aid on a flesh wound for so many years. And I'm not discrediting any other person that I've heard speak or preach, but he just made it so plain. And I felt it was just, and I went through RE3. I tried going back to my primary care. I got a prescription, and then they gave me a list of numbers for therapy. But the mental health crisis and insurance is a very tricky world. If I can't function, how am I supposed to advocate to find the right therapist or find the right physician that's not just going to want to hand me a prescription? So thank God for RE3, because they gave me some people that really nurtured me and helped me get to where I needed to get. And they were it was a weekly counseling session, and they were my follow-up Were you able to get a hold of this person? Did you contact that person? Checking in on me. Because that's important. So.
Amen. Amen. First of all, thank you for sharing. It definitely, one of the first things Rebecca said is that she could say that she's experiencing, dealing with bipolar, depression, anxiety. And the fact that she can say that means God has really brought her a long way. When you can say it in front of people you don't know, who have the right to feel and think what they want to think about you, and that you're here boldly saying, God, help me take that first step. And I'm so thankful that you mentioned the trickiness of the insurance and yet the church, because the church has to be there when nothing else is. Yes. And there are a lot of people who don't have insurance coverage to go get help. Well, where's the church? The church is that one entity that has to help overcome that particular hurdle, because everyone deserves the help that's available. And so, Mo, I want to ask one final question. And as a church, where do we go? What do we do now?
Absolutely. We know prayer is our number one recourse, right? We know we are to take everything to God. And so prayer is important, but it shouldn't stop there. Taking that to the next level, just like Rebecca started with asking for prayer and said enough is enough, and so she then started asking for help. And so if you know that you need more than just a prayer to get to God, and you need something or someone here to help you, then start asking for help as well. Even if you don't know what that help is, what that help looks like, just say, I need help. Reach out to us here at the church. Call the church. We are here Monday through Thursday, and on Saturday, and on Sunday. But we can, if we don't have answers, we can get answers for you. So don't think that just because we are the church and we don't have all the answers, that we can't get those answers for you. Encouragement, being present, being available, we talked about that. But you might be asking, for some of you might be asking, well, what is RE3? RE3 is our mental health and Christian counseling ministry. RE3 stands for Revealing Christ, Relieving Suffering, and Restoring Lives. And that is our goal. We want to reveal Christ to you. We want Christ to be revealed in your life. We want your life to be restored. We want you to live the abundant life that God talks about in his word, that he promises in his word. Will every day be a good day? Of course not. But it wasn't for Jesus either. So who are we to think that every day for us will be a good day? So RE3 has 4 different components. Christian counseling is individualized, family counseling, premarital counseling, marital counseling. We deal from the young ones to our more seasoned brothers and sisters, but it's more one-on-one counseling. We also have our grace groups. We have Living Grace, which is what Rebecca participated in. That is for support groups for those who are currently struggling with a mental illness, whether diagnosed or undiagnosed. That's Living Grace. Family Grace is for those who are family members who are supporting those who are struggling with a mental illness. They too need their support, so we have a support group for them too. Celebrate Recovery is on the way. I'm so excited about that piece that's coming. This is faith-based. As a matter of fact, all of our groups and our counseling is all faith-based. But Celebrate Recovery, faith-based, looks a little different than it does on the secular side. As we opened up, Rebecca and I, we stated our name. My name is Monique. I'm a believer, and I have lived experience with depression and anxiety. Well, the secular Celebrate Recovery kind of forces you to identify with your addiction or your struggle. And so that statement, opening statement, would have sounded something like this: my name is Monique and I'm a drug addict, right? But that's not who God says I am. So I'm not gonna claim that. I'm a believer, okay? That's what I'm claiming. And I struggle with, or I have lived experience with. And so Celebrate Recovery is not just for addictions such as alcoholism or drug addictions. It's any hurts, habits, or hangups that you might be dealing with. So if you have a shopping problem, come on and bring your shopping self to Celebrate Recovery. If you have a gambling problem, you can't seem to stay out of the casinos, and that's a problem for you, come home and bring your gambling self to Celebrate Recovery. If you are struggling with a hurt that you've experienced in the past, whether it be a long time ago or just yesterday, and you can't seem to shake it, come to Celebrate Recovery. So any hurts, habits, or hangups is what Celebrate Recovery is. So please don't think that it's only for those major addictions that are always put in front of us. And then we have Grief Share that will be coming on board with RE3 as well. And Grief Share it's just that. It's a support group for those who are grieving the loss of loved ones. So that's where we are, where it's available to everyone, not just the Bayview community, but the community at large. Can I just say this too? So RE3 has been in existence since May 2018. We started off with our grace groups, okay? Did good, considering we've never done something like this at Bayview before. Then we launched our Christian counseling. The Sunday that Pastor put the information out, I promise you, before I could leave campus, actually it might have started at the 8:30 service, the counseling requests started hitting my inbox. And I kid you not, there were 6 counseling requests in that one day. And 5 of them were not members of Bayview, but they were here and they were listening and they said, I need help. So understand, it's not just for the Bayview community, although we want the Bayview community to take advantage of it, but it's also for the community at large. So let the community know. I don't know of any other church in our community that is offering, Christian counseling and different support groups. I know there are churches who are doing that. They're not in this community though. Okay, and so we have it, and that's a part of us attempting to remove the stigma, to say it is okay not to be okay. So that's where we are.
Amen. Amen. Family, were you blessed today with everything that we discussed? I pray that you really were blessed. I want to thank Rebecca for sharing her story, and I want to thank Mo for bringing all of the information.